You're okay? Very good. We're right to start. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm joined by the Federal Member for Riverina, Michael McCormack, who covers many of the communities who are currently experiencing major flooding, including the towns of Wagga and Forbes. I'm also joined by Wes Fang, Member of the New South Wales Legislative Council, and Barry Griffiths, who is our Commander, our Incident Control Commander, who will provide an update in a moment in relation to the current flooding and weather conditions. We are continuing to see multiple flood risks across multiple river systems and communities today. Whether it's the Murrumbidgee, the Lachlan, the Barwon, the Murray, even the Edward, we have 9 major flood warnings across our river systems west of the Divide today. We have more than 100 emergency warnings in place across communities in New South Wales today. So whilst we are experiencing a reprieve in the weather, and in fact it's lovely to see some blue skies, the risk has not abated in relation to the amount of water that is in our river systems, passing through our communities and impacting on the daily lives of communities right across New South Wales. Here in Wagga, the peak was experienced yesterday afternoon at 9.72 metres, slightly below the 9.8 that was the final prediction by the Bureau of Meteorology, but still incredibly high and major flooding for these communities. We are expecting that water to recede as the day and weekend progresses, falling to moderate sometime tomorrow. We're working very hard with the communities of North Wagga and surrounds to get people back into their homes as quickly as possible. And I really want to thank the communities for working with us over the past few days. The community engagement has been absolutely outstanding. And I also like to commend the SES for the work that they've done in ensuring that the community has been best prepared through this time. In relation to Forbes, the river continues to rise. It's currently 10.66 and on track for the 10.8 metre, which is on par with the flooding we saw there 70 years ago in June of 1952. So that community is very much still on alert, and for good reason, and we will continue to work with that community to ensure that we do get through this latest challenging time all together and in one piece. Of course, after these floodwaters move through the communities of Wagga and Forbes, that water then moves downstream. So in relation to the Murrumbidgee, that water will now head towards Narrandera, where we are expecting to see a peak sometime tomorrow of around about 8.2 metres, which is major for that community. In relation to the Lachlan, we will start to experience major flooding yet again in communities like Yarrabalong and Condobolin. My message to communities today, as is every day, please continue to keep up to date with the advice and the warnings that are issued by the Bureau of Meteorology and the SES. Those warnings are issued, that advice is issued to keep you and your families safe during this time, and to be particularly aware of the risks as they present themselves to you in your local communities. Because whilst your house may not be at risk of inundation, the roads and access to the things that you need may very well be cut, impacting on your daily life. Finally, I'd like to encourage people, please, not to enter floodwaters under any circumstances. You simply don't know what is in floodwaters. We've got situations where we could have raw sewage entering our floodwaters, all matter of debris, chemicals. It's just not worth the risk to your health. And of course, repeating that message about not driving through floodwaters, you put yourself at risk, you put your family or your passengers at risk, and of course you put at risk the lives of our emergency services volunteers who will respond to your call for help when you find yourself in difficulty, but it really does put them in a tricky situation. On the final note of volunteers, I'd like to today extend my deepest gratitude once again to each and every emergency services volunteer right across New South Wales. Today we have SES volunteers, we have RFS volunteers, the VRA are out in force. We also have Surf Lifesaving based in towns right across New South Wales. They are well supported by fire and rescue, police and ambulance. I really want to say thank you for continuing to give up your valuable time away from your work, time away from your families, to continue supporting our communities through this time. I know that you're tired. I know that this has been a long year and we're currently in a long campaign that for this event started on the 14th of September. But we will get through this and with your continued support, our communities will continue to get through this as well. I'll now hand over to Barry for an update in relation to flooding and weather, and then we'll hear from local member Michael McCormack.
Thank you, Minister. So in terms of updates for New South Wales SES and our response, moving along on the Lachlan River, we've assembled quite a large task force over the last 24 hours that are currently helping residents respond to the emergency that's happening up there right now. They're supported by aviation assets and high clearance vehicles to support them through that flood response. In Cowra, we're seeing the end to flooding there. So today we're looking at getting impact assessment teams out so we can reduce the areas that are under evacuation orders and reduce the messaging there and get people back into their homes as soon as we can. On the Murrumbidgee River, we've seen the rivers drop, and we're working with Council to make sure that the area is safe to allow people getting in. It's our intent to get as many people back in as soon as possible into their homes. And along the Murray River, we're still working down in Moama. The river is looking like it's going to reach 94.4 metres early next week, so there'll be a response phase there, and again looking to try to get people back into their homes as soon as we can. In terms of preparation operations, we're still working at Condobolin and working to look through the towns of Yenda and Narendra, as the Minister was saying, to prepare them for future flooding operations, and then downstream of Moama in Barham and Majura to prepare those communities for potential flooding as well. In recovery, lastly, we're working with Resilience New South Wales and welfare coordinators to make sure communities understand their requirements and things that are available to them when they're given the all clear to move back into the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. And the wise words of both the SES Control Centre here and Incident Controller, as well as Minister Cook, should be heeded. I get there is a level of frustration in the communities because so many people have had to sandbag their homes, so many people have had to leave their homes. Indeed, I just got off the phone from Phyllis Miller, the Mayor of Forbes. 1,000 people in that community alone are under evacuation orders, and that is a time of frustration. It is a time when also communities band together like never before, and they always do it. In the worst of times, you see the best of Australians, and we're seeing that here in the Riverina and Central West and elsewhere as people come from all over the state, indeed all over the nation, to help out how and where they can, and that's to be commended. But as well as that, I get that businesses have had to close. I understand full well that farmers have lost crops, and that's going to take a heavy toll on their bottom lines. Many of those farmers were expecting a bumper harvest this year, and that's all just been destroyed by the floodwaters which have swept through the Riverina and Central West, and that is so unfortunate. But you're not alone, and certainly there is going to be help available. Already the Commonwealth and the state have come together for various aid assistances, and those packages will not only continue, but they'll be extended, I'm sure, in the future as Premier Perrottet and Prime Minister Albanese talk about what we can do for flood recovery. We've got the Minister for Flood Recovery, Steph Cook, who's working night and day to make sure these communities are looked after now and will be looked after into the future. Again, Minister Cook's words are very wise. Please don't drive into floodwaters. You just don't know the extent of those potholes. You don't know that there could be submerged logs, even on roads that you're very familiar with. Take heed of those warnings. Take heed of authorities' advice. If you are asked to leave your home, it's for the best possible reason. And I appreciate too there will be a level of frustration at organisations such as State Water, but when you understand that we have thus far avoided multiple homes being inundated, State Water working on that very delicate balance of making sure that water releases are done just at the right time, have done an excellent job, and they are under pressure like never before, and they seem to have got their maths right, and I say to them, thank you for doing what you're doing under extreme difficulties. And I also commend local council workers who've gone away above and beyond to make sure that road closures are put in place where necessary, that the sandbags and all that assistance by a wonderful, wonderful volunteers are there in place. But thank you to all those council workers. Many of them are doing this work in their own time. Many of them won't be paid for the work that they're doing. So if you have a road closure and you're banked up in traffic, that's just unfortunate, but please, please obey those orders. Listen to those people who are wearing whatever colour uniform they might have on. They are there to protect you. They are there to protect your belongings. And as we said just the other day, we can always replace belongings. We can always replace goods. We cannot replace lives. And so please take care. And let's hope this dry weather continues. Wes.
Thank you, Michael. I just wanted to pass on the thanks of the community to the SES in particular, and all the other rescue services that have provided assistance during this difficult time. As the Minister has said, and also the local member Michael McCormack, please do not drive into floodwaters. Your life is not worth the risk. It's not worth putting other people's lives at risk to rescue you. And if you are seeking to travel somewhere, be prepared, know what's on your route, and if you're not able to get somewhere, that's okay. Your life is not worth the risk. Just remember that if you are seeking assistance, the SES number is 132 500, and just remember that the warning signs are there for your benefit. I understand the frustration that people are experiencing, but we're just going to have to wait to get through this. We'll do it together, we'll do it as a community, and that's the Australian way. So I just urge everybody to heed those warning signs, don't drive into floodwaters, stay safe.
Barry Griffiths, are you able to talk through in both Forbes and Wagga Wagga, what sort of inundation have we seen of properties so far?
So far we've seen some overflow inundation into low-lying areas, particularly in Forbes, particularly around the north to the eastern section, and there's a small CBD section in the centre of town where the Newell Highway meets the main CBD. That's as our overflight was last night. I'm expecting that to be a little bit worse. There'll be a lot of overflow flooding in and around the lower parts of the CBD area, and some of the area towards the south and east of Forbes. In Wagga itself, we haven't done our impact assessment. Generally speaking, the impact of this level of flooding isn't as high as normally you'd expect. There are some properties that do have overflow flooding. I think there's a handful around Gumley, and there'll be a handful around North Wagga. Inside the North Wagga levee, the properties are safe and intact there.
In Forbes, are you able to put a number figure on how many properties you do expect to be inundated at this stage?
No, not at this stage, because every time there's been a flood through Forbes, the floodwaters behave differently based off the soil moisture and crop heights. So we really need to wait for the impact assessment to be done before I'm able to give a figure to that.
Speaking of Forbes, I understand that the river there has been sitting at 10.6 for over 12 hours now. You do expect the river to reach that 10.8 peak that is predicted?
Again, we're working off what the Bureau have told us. 10.8 is still current in their messaging. Again, we've seen a number of floods move through that town, and they do behave differently every time. I'm fingers crossed that we don't reach that height, but at this stage, that's the information we have.
Locals say that although the river is sort of getting to similar heights as it has in previous floods, this one has been more devastating. Is it because even though the water isn't higher, it's spreading out further? I probably can't comment to that. There's a number of contributing factors that do affect flood.
definitely the saturation levels in the Lachlan Valley are contributing to the flood. But in terms of the exact nature, until the after action review is completed, I won't be able to comment.
Here in Wagga Wagga on Wednesday, the situation escalated very quickly. It went from what we thought was going to be a moderate flood to a major flood. What was the data set or information that came in that saw, I guess, that catalyst and that turn of events, the evacuations and so forth happen?
Yeah, so we've got a number of clear triggers in our key flood-prone towns that we work off. When the Bureau gives us those flood levels, that's essentially the trigger. So once the Bureau release that information, then we act off the trigger, same as Forbes with the 10.8. We hold firm to what they tell us. If the river does something different, then we react to that. But generally speaking, as soon as the Bureau releases their predicted level, we'll plan to that.
How difficult is it, I guess, to make those predictions, given that we know on both the Lachlan and the Murrumbidgee there are dozens of unmetered creek systems that are all absolutely chock-a-block at the moment? That must make it difficult to try and give those figures that the community so desperately needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make it quite challenging.
When it comes to the Murrumbidgee, it's now moving down to Narrandera. You did say that. I understand around Berrumbet Weir and to the east of that area, we've seen some very significant river rises overnight. What is the likely inundation of Narrandera at that major peak? Are we likely to see houses go under in Narrandera there, or will it be similar to what we've seen in previous weeks?
Yeah, similar to previous weeks, yeah.
And as far as the Marul Creek system, I understand major flooding is predicted at the East Marul regulator. Can you just talk me through what the situation is on the Marul Creek and what you think the likely effects of that flooding is going to be, particularly on the Yenda community over the coming 24 hours or so? Okay,
yeah, so we're expecting major flooding in around the Yenda Creek. We're having intelligence collection teams go down there today and get some local knowledge around there. We're expecting some streets, from what I hear, the main part of the town should be okay, but the low-lying areas there are at risk at the moment, and we should get some information out today once our intelligence teams can definitely identify what areas are at risk in that area.
Is the breach of Barrenbox Swamp still happening?
I've got no information about that.
I've just got heard that there were some children caught in playing floodwaters in Chimit yesterday. Has there been any concerns or incidents around Wagga with that?
There's been a couple of flood rescues around Wagga, but yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard about the incident in Chimit overnight. But yeah, we expect it to continue. People will unfortunately continue to drive through floodwater, and you know the numbers getting stuck. I'm happy that the community's actually listened to the messaging that we put out at the moment. The roads, as you know, everyone's spoken about this morning, the roads are deteriorating under these conditions. So nobody's seen these conditions before in the area. So even local knowledge, locals are getting caught out driving through crossings that they think are safe. The roads and the way that your car behaves when you're moving through water versus the way your car behaves when you get stuck in water are two completely different things. When you hit a deep pothole and you stop, that's when people get sucked away and taken off the road into deeper water. So, you know, again, we continue to urge people not to drive through floodwater, to stay away from floodwater. It's extremely dangerous at the moment. It's full of debris. So stay away from it. It's not a normal creek, and don't drive through it.
Barry Griffiths, when it comes to Wagga Wagga and particularly the people who have been evacuated at North Wagga and Gumley and East Wagga and so forth, how soon do you expect those evacuation orders to be lifted and people able to get back into their houses?
Okay, so in terms of North Wagga inside the levee, we're working closely with council. We want them back as soon as possible. We're just waiting for some engineering reports to come back to determine the safety of the embankment that leads into Wagga. Once council are satisfied that that is in a stable condition, we'll allow local access only back into North Wagga. And the reason we say that is the town is still a little bit below the level of the Murrumbidgee River being held up by the levee, and there's infrastructure in place that's cutting off some roads with pump hoses and things moving across town. So it'll only be for local traffic only for North Wagga. Gumley and the other areas of Wagga that have been evacuated, that will be as we move into the area and deem that the area is free for people to return. Again, it's not our objective to keep people out from these towns as long as we can. I want them back in as soon as I can. That's what we're working hard to do.
And is there concern with the weather in a week's time that this may come back fairly soon, depending on where the rain falls, or what CICS doing to in that regard?
Okay, so at the moment we're planning out. We've had long-term forecasts from the Bureau that say we're going to get a wetter than normal summer. So we're planning for that. Every time it rains, you get a different effect every time. The catchment conditions that we have at the moment are incredibly wet, and seasonally we always get these low pressure systems that cause this current level of flooding move through every week or so. So I'd love to say that this is it, it's over, it's not, but the reality is we're going to see more flooding. I can't, there is no crystal ball as to what we will see. So the communities out there need to remain vigilant. They need to maintain awareness of what's happening around them, keep up to date with current news and affairs, maintain their flood preparation, react to road closures. As this floodwater moves down through the system, roads are going to open and close periodically, and that's going to continue for a long period of time into the weeks and months. My advice to communities is to stay prepared and continue to prepare. Don't, if you've done a little bit, there's always something you can do to enhance your protection.
Steph Cork, we know that there are hundreds, possibly thousands of flood-affected and flood-damaged roads across the state, some of which will probably have to stay closed for some time to allow those repairs to be carried out. What, I guess, is the state government's plan if there are large chunks of inland New South Wales that have major highways and other thoroughfares closed for an indefinite amount of time?
Well, certainly Minister Faraway, as the Minister for Regional Roads and Transport, is working hard with his team in relation to state and regional roads, and also supporting local councils to make those repairs. The first thing, and as Emergency Services Minister, the first thing that needs to happen is for the waters to recede so that the proper assessments and the data can be gathered so that we understand the full extent of the damage, which will be different in each local government area, but nonetheless that assessment process must be undertaken, because that's what will guide the state government and indeed the federal government in relation to further support and packages down the line. We've already announced, or Minister Faraway has announced, the $50 million special round of the Fixing Local Roads program, and that is specifically for potholes. That will go a long way to helping local councils restore roads more quickly so that they are passable, so that they are safe for motorists and their vehicles. That's already underway. We also have, of course, the Natural Disaster Declaration in place now for 66 local government areas in relation to this event. And under Category A and B support, there is already that support for councils to restore their road network. So funding is already available for councils to do that. It's that over and above resilience and betterment piece that the New South Wales and federal governments are looking at, along with local government. But that process is going to take some time, insofar as we need the floodwaters to recede before we can get in and get that data.
That 50 million realistically isn't going to go that far though, so how much more do you think the state government can commit to fixing the state's roads?
Minister Faraway will have more to say in relation to that, that funding into the future. But we are aware, as the New South Wales government, and we are working with the federal government, that our road network has been severely impacted. The Premier has made a number of remarks along those lines as he has travelled around to many flood-affected communities in recent weeks all over New South Wales. So we are very much alive to this issue. We are working with the federal government in relation to additional supports for councils. We are doing everything we can as the situation presents itself and we are able to respond. It's just going to take some time in some of those locations. We know that there are communities, particularly in the west of New South Wales, which will be experiencing major flooding for weeks, if not months. So we need that floodwater to clear out before we can get in, and engineers to do the appropriate assessments, not just on the road surface, but on the road pavements, and that will guide and provide that data for the next steps in relation to forming up those funding packages to help restore our road network across New South Wales.
Michael McCormack, do you think the federal government will need to play a bigger role in restoring the state's road network?
Well, quite frankly, they're going to have to. They're absolutely going to have to. And I know when I was Deputy Prime Minister and put in place that local roads and community infrastructure program, the Riverina electorate alone received more than $55 million. Now, I very much appreciate Sam Farraway and the New South Wales Government for putting in place the $50 million as a special emergency fund to fix potholes. That's a good start, and I do hope that the New South Wales and the federal governments can work together, collaboratively, cooperatively, to do what they can. This is an emergency. Indeed, the roads, because of the weather, were made atrocious. They're now dangerous, and some of those potholes, they can do some severe damage, not only to smaller vehicles, but indeed the trucks that use our byways and highways to cart goods and etc. And with a grain harvest coming on, and there will be a harvest, that's going to only exacerbate the situation as more trucks are on the road.
Thank you.
Thanks to our defence people too. I appreciate that Australian Defence Force have moved into Forbes. Black Hawk helicopters are on standby to help with any situation. But thank you to our ADF. They do a mighty job. Many of them are trained right here in Wagga Wagga, both in Army and Air Force, and indeed the Navy. But certainly thank you to our ADF people. They do a mighty job, and we need them as much as ever right now. Thank you.